In June 2021, a 67-year-old woman was brutally murdered in her home in Wembley, North London. Her headless corpse wasn't discovered for 2 weeks. The police investigation would uncover a diabolical plan to inherit the victim's estate devised by a devious, manipulative and homicidal individual, someone who would literally go to any lengths necessary to get what they wanted, including murder and mutilation. Be careful of making new friends. This is the case of Jemma Mitchell. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. If you're new here, on a Wednesday and a Sunday every single week, same time, I release my crime content. So if you do enjoy a little bit of crime and consistency, this is definitely the channel for you. Thank you to all of you coming from all over the UK to my shows. Also got exciting news that hopefully 2024-25 I will go over to the States as well. So it's getting super exciting, and thank you very much for all of your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, why don't you? Go on, it won't cost you anything. On that note though, to all of you who are supporting me on my Patreon channel and also my YouTube membership, thank you billions. Couldn't do it without you, literally couldn't do it without you. You make such a difference to my content creation and you allow it to get better and better. Appreciated much, thank you. Head exploded a bit when I read about this case, heard about this case, watched the verdict, literally, as it played out in court. It's one of those particular murders that has such a blindsiding level of the unexpected to it. So when I talk to you about this, I think there are so many different layers, and hopefully we'll explore some of those today. So let me take you back to 2021. We have 36-year-old property developer Jemma Mitchell, and she's living with her mum in Willesden, northwest London. Mitchell was born on the 22nd of July 1984, and she was actually born in Australia. So her mother, Hilary Collard, she worked for the Foreign Office, and she and Mitchell's father were living together in Australia at that time. Now that marriage actually later broke down and Mitchell's parents did separate, meaning that her mum moved back to the UK with Mitchell and her sister. Mitchell was only 2 at the time, but obviously quite a lot of upheaval at that moment in time. Certainly a move of country and a separation of parent is going to have its impact even on very young children. Also worth noting that her dad didn't really feature that much in her life, but apparently she really did dream of being reunited with him, which feels like an absolutely typical experience that most children would experience if they had a parent who was absent. And certainly a lot of individuals who have not had a close relationship and an attached relationship with one particular parent dreams of that reconciliation, reunion and a second chance at that relationship. And that fantasy is certainly something that features in this particular woman's life. What would I say about Mitchell's previous character? Honestly, good. She was known to be a woman of previously good character. She'd had like a minor previous conviction, and it was for breach of a non-molestation order, and that breach was connected to a domestic issue which involved her sister and her brother-in-law, and she received a conditional discharge. So certainly nothing provocative that we can see that stands out when she was growing up and that would indicate that we were dealing with the kind of killer that we're talking about today. Also, she's a really highly intelligent woman. So in 2006, she achieved her first class honours in human sciences from King's College London. Excellent university, very, very excellent university. And to get a first class demonstrates high intellect of academia. Now, her degree it actually included a module called Structural Basis of Human Function. And during this module, Mitchell learned to literally entirely dissect a human body. That was with the exception of the head and the neck. So she understood that anatomy. She also completed additional special study courses in experimental anatomy, and apparently she showed a massive aptitude for anatomy in general. She was awarded the Hamilton Prize for Anatomical Experience in 2009. So she is standing out for all the right reasons back then, but obviously, what can I say? Picking up certain skills that I think later down the line are going to end in a terrible action. So she then went on to complete a degree course in osteopathy at the British School of Osteopathy. And again, this included modules on anatomy, biomechanics, and pathophysiology of the human body. It's at this point she actually moves to Australia, and she goes on to work as an osteopath in Australia, and she does that for several years. And her professional website actually stated that she was attuned to subjects in neuroanatomy, genetics, and dissection of human cadavers. And with respect, these are skills that she is going to put into horrific use in the future. Now, after several years in Australia, she then comes back and returns to the UK. This is in 2015. And at this point, she moves into the family home with her mum and also her sister. This is in Brondesbury Park in London, and that's in the borough of Brent. She didn't actually work after this point, and she wasn't registered to practice in the UK, but she does start to, I would say, start portraying herself as an alternative therapist and a self-styled healer. That's kind of the way that she's portraying herself to the local community and people who meet her. Also, who wouldn't want to move home and just not get a job and move in with mum? Just throwing it out there. There are days that I dream of such things in my own life. Also, I looked and found some information out about an ex-boyfriend, and this ex-boyfriend said that Mitchell became really obsessed with religion and the Bible. And in 2018, she actually told a congregation of around 300 evangelicals at a North London church that she wanted to be exorcised of her demons. And that literally is what happened. And she didn't just tell the congregation that she wanted that to happen. Basically, at this point, according to a former friend who was there, the pastor who was leading the service put his hands on Mitchell's head, and she started shaking and crying, then screamed in hysteria, fell to the floor, and apparently it was like a scene from a horror movie. Unsurprisingly, congregation were a little bit on the shocked side, because it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one in such scenarios, because on one level, it's contextual. We've all seen the movies, haven't we? Where there is some kind of exorcism. It tends not to end that well a lot of the time for the ministers, pastors and vicars who are doing these kind of things. But nonetheless, we've seen it. So there is a contextual side of this where casting out demons is a part of religion. But for the average person, popping along to a service, it's not really what you expect, is it? Not on a Sunday. Don't expect it, you know. Feel like I've got a demon in me. Touch his head, throws herself around writhing, and it's challenging because you don't want to dispute that. After all, there's quite a lot about it in the book. But at the same time, you think to yourself, maybe this actually isn't somebody who has a demon inside her. Maybe this is somebody who is emotionally struggling, or maybe has some psychological disturbance going on and is really in a challenged state of mind. But like I said, it caused quite a reaction and people did not know what to make of it. Also, Mitchell's personality was said to be one that would change very, very quickly. She would switch. So she'd go from being very happy one moment, she'd be smiling, and then she'd just emotionally shut down the next moment. Also, people noted that she would cry, but she wouldn't actually make a sound. So she would just have this blank face, and it was really disconcerting. And people say that knew her throughout the years that there was certainly a shift and change in her character as she got older. So they noted that she went from a very happy, bubbly, outgoing individual, somebody who clearly did have a bright future. I mean, I listed her qualifications, the fact that she was awarded for her academia, and that she was really thriving. And then people say that she starts to become reclusive, she becomes very troubled, and some refer to her as a religious fanatic. So that she had these interests in praying and Bible readings. She also loved her cats and her plants. And she also at this point seems to become very visibly disheveled. Now, I know a lot of you watching will be like, hang on a minute, what's that? What's that, Emma? I like reading the Bible. I like going to church. I love my cats. What are you saying? I'm saying nothing. I'm saying nothing about that. I'm just noticing that according to people who knew her, there is a decline in her social experience, and she has a focus in areas that they don't necessarily feel are featuring that positively for her. But of course, we all know it is my dream to grow old with cats, and I indeed have my own faith. So therefore, me and the big God get on very well as far as I'm concerned. I'm not about to run out and kill anyone at all. Mind you, nor do I think there's a demon inside me. So this is the picture that's being painted by people who know Mitchell. Now, as I said, she's gone home and she's living with her mum and her older sister, and they actually live in this large property. It's worth about £1 million. Mitchell lived on the first floor and mother on the ground floor, and that house had been in the family for generations, and it actually passed into Mitchell's sole name after her grandparents' death, which I find a bit weird. I'm not going to lie. I always think to myself, if you have other siblings, surely it would go to both of you or all of you or other family members who are involved, but I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of tradition there. I'm just saying, bit of a recipe for resentment for me. If I were to find out that my mother's house and my father's house was just going to my older sister, it would be difficult when we were having Sunday lunch together. I may want to put something in her food. I wouldn't want to do that. You all know I would not want to do that. But I do think it's a cause for resentment. But anyway, this is the way it goes. It has fell as a home into real disrepair. You can find pictures of it online, and they were living in squalor. That's the only way I can describe it. If any of you have watched programs on hoarders, very, very reflective of that. Now, hoarders, just to put it out there, is on the same spectrum as OCD. So there's a spectrum. Now, a lot of people think that OCD is something that will mean that your home is incredibly immaculate. And indeed, without a doubt, for some people who suffer from OCD, it does involve being super tidy, or they have issues around the idea of germs, or it could be ritualistic, but there is a whole spectrum. OCD can also mean ruminations, intrusive thoughts. It's got nothing to do with those physical things I've just talked about for certain individuals who suffer from it. And as I've mentioned, hoarding is also on that spectrum. So it's on a sub-syndrome of it. So this is all going on, and the house is a big problem. But instead of focusing on resolving the issues in that place, because it's worth a substantial amount of money, you know, £1 million is a lot of cash. But it seems that instead of dealing with the reality of what they were facing, which is a home that is just crumbling and where they have literally filled that home with so much stuff that they can hardly move around. And as I said, if that is indicative of somebody who's a hoarder, it's not that that person is dirty and filthy and terrible. It's just that they're dealing with something psychologically very, very troubling, and it's not been resolved. And this is the way that they manage their world because of the chaos it presents. But in spite of all this, instead of focusing on what they do have and sorting that out, they decide to make plans to build an extra third floor, which is going to be expensive. So first of all, they agree with these two builders that this work's going to be undertaken. It's a very big job. And they actually hand over £230,000. That's a lot of money. And Mitchell decides she's going to project manage the work, which is a good idea. Anybody who's watched any programs where you are doing something enormous to your home or building your own new home, you being present is paramount to the build on the whole. But in spite of the fact that they spent all this huge amount of money, one of the builders basically cheats them. So he takes 130 grand, 130,000 pounds, and just doesn't complete the work, went bankrupt instead. And then if that isn't bad enough, that you've literally lost all that money, the second firm that they get in to try to resolve the issues, they then quote £500,000 to finish the job. Now, Mitchell does hand over £100,000, but isn't able to pay the remainder, and the consequence of that is that builders ultimately stop the work. Again, I think we've got some insight there into her mindset. The fact that, first of all, they parted with this huge amount of money initially and not thought about incrementally paying it, because at the end of the day, if somebody's given 230 grand and they can just decide that they've gone insolvent, which you can basically write off your debts, it's an incentive for them to just lose the money, isn't it? So she isn't thinking ahead consequentially about those kind of potentials and possibilities. But then to get a company in and agree that there's 500,000 that needs spending to resolve the issues within the home, to pay them 100,000 and to not expect them to just stop when you don't have the other 400 grand, well, that shows again very poor consequential thinking. They're not going to do the job when you're 400 grand short. And where is the mindset and belief system that comes thinking that you'll just magically find this 400k? So at this point, they're in a real mess. They're in this property, it's not even got a roof or heating, and it is just covered in scaffolding, and they have insufficient funds to arrange for anyone else to finish the job. If you could expect and experience a disaster when you think about renovating a home, this is absolutely what we would describe as the disaster. It must have been incredibly challenging, psychologically very, very stressful. And for Mitchell, of course, she was the one overseeing it, and she probably feels a level of responsibility for that reality. Now, as I've mentioned, Mitchell was a devout Christian, and she was also therefore a member of her local church. And it's here that she meets 67-year-old Malaysian national Mee Kuen Chong. Now, she's also known as Deborah Chong. So she meets her at a prayer group. Now, Deborah is a widow, but she's also a very, very devout Christian, and she lived in Wembley with her lodger, David Klein. She had actually lived there for more than 30 years. Also worth noting that she was considered to be a woman of some wealth, but she was also really, really generous. So aside from the fact that she was very open about her financial affairs, and potentially generosity can be exploited, I'm sure we all know that. We all know that. We've all met a member of our own family, haven't we? Or our extended family who likes us to be generous with them. You know, we have exploiters around us all the time, and it's why sometimes it can be good to keep your finances close to your chest, because there will be people who try to take advantage of that. The reality of her talking about her wealth means that she does create a foundational fracture, because she believes clearly that she can trust the world around her, and unfortunately that is not true, particularly when it comes down to money. There are always people in every circumstance, even in church. You know, we like to say that 100% of people who go to church are lovely. 100% of people who go to the mosque are lovely. 100% of people who go to synagogues and so on and so forth are lovely. It's not true. There will always be one or two individuals who are quite the contrary, but they still attend. So her talking about her actual financial situation, and also being known to be quite a pushover when it comes down to money because of her generosity, that certainly puts her in a desirable position if you were somebody who had a mindset of exploitation. She was known to offer money to people. She did that regularly. And also she did talk about the fact that when she died, she would leave her home to particular individuals. She actually offered to leave her home to various people. I think you can tell from the tiny amount I've told you about Deborah, there's obviously a real sweetness to her, a real compassion within her, but she's really vulnerable, very, very vulnerable individual. So she's had a serious history of mental illness, and she's been known to be very, very erratic, particularly following the death of her husband, which we would completely understand. If you are an individual who has dealt with something like psychosis or schizophrenia, and those illnesses that can create sudden slides in mental wellness, they are exacerbated when under duress and stress. If you lose your partner and you're suddenly on your own, you probably never are going to have been in more of a stress situation, and it makes perfect sense that at that point your mental health would drop, and therefore it can amplify the problems within your mental illness. Also, she was known at times to be aggressive verbally, but a lot of this is probably down to the fact that, like I said, there are moments where she's in mental decline. She was actually diagnosed a few years before her death with schizophrenia, and she'd spent several months being treated on a psychiatric ward. So again, that indicates just how difficult things were for Deborah at times. Also worth noting that when she is offering people financial help, and she did do that regularly, the vast majority of people said no thank you, because they were good human beings who realised that she was vulnerable. But some didn't, and Mitchell would most definitely be one of these. And I also acknowledge that Mitchell was in a desperate position, so when somebody's offering money to you, there is kind of a reality where you will be thinking, well, maybe this will answer my prayers. But still, if you know somebody is vulnerable and easy to exploit, and then you take advantage of that, it's disturbing as far as I'm concerned. So as I said, Mitchell and Deborah meet around August 2020. So that's not very long ago, you know? It's 2022 when I am telling you about this case. And I'm talking about the fact that Deborah does not make it alive out of this relationship. So they become good friends. Apparently they exchange hundreds of text messages. And Deborah at this point apparently believes that Mitchell's helping to cure her mental illness, because bear in mind, what Mitchell is doing is saying that she's kind of spiritual healer. And Deborah wants to feel different. It's understandable, particularly if you've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Look, when you have this particular disorder, you are an individual who can go through the most scary scenarios, the most suspicious of moments, paranoia, delusions, auditory and visual hallucinations. It's truly terrifying. And for some individuals, they respond really well to medication. For others, they don't. And you can fully believe, can't you, that if you have a trust in God and you're an individual who feels that there is hope and healing, you're going to cling on to that. And it does not surprise me whatsoever that Deborah does. When I used to go to church with my kids, I went for many, many years with my kids until they were like 12. I often would go and they'd bring faith healers in, and so many people would turn up and just want people to lay their hands on them with the hope that there would be some kind of religious healing. So it's not something that I don't connect with. I appreciate it's something that many, many believe in. And Deborah undoubtedly would have felt that there was a potential that Mitchell could help her. Because remember what we said about Mitchell? She's very bright. She's very intelligent. She's got a good history regarding her physiological understanding. She understands anatomy. She can probably talk a good game when it comes down to what Deborah's going through. And that bias of trust, along with meeting in a church group, well, that's going to bond them without a doubt. So they meet in the August 2020, as I've said, and then by the following month, this is September 2020, loads of messages have been exchanged, and between them, they start discussing Deborah's will and who's going to inherit her home, like within a month. I don't know. I think that's a little bit on the fast side, isn't it? Mitchell's already been left the home and the family home, hasn't it? At the end of the day, maybe Mitchell's got a bit of a thing about wanting to inherit stuff. But just imagine, we've all got into intense friendships. Most of us have been in scenarios where we've had conversations, you know, that are challenging or provocative, or asked for advice of people that we've become close to. But I don't know, I'm a little bit uncomfortable about the fact that within a few weeks, they're talking about Deborah's will and who would inherit her home. So apparently Deborah then starts to seek Mitchell's advice, and this is all about whether she should leave a home to a charity. And the premise of leaving it to a charity is because she's saying that she'd like to avoid inheritance tax. So in one email, Deborah stated this: I am honoured to have you as my sister accept me as your friend and advise me. So Deborah is clearly feeling really grateful for the help that Mitchell's giving her. For those of you who don't know what inheritance tax is in the UK, well, it's this appalling tax. So basically, we're taxed our entire life, and then when we get our pensions that we've saved up and paid for, we get taxed on that. I actually don't have a pension, don't tell anybody that. Throw myself at the mercy of the state when I'm older. And then when you finally die, you have to pay your death duties. Of course you do, death taxes. But then when you've managed to accumulate, I don't know, some property for your kids, for example, and in the UK, house prices are extortionately high, therefore 325 grand isn't actually quite a lot of money anymore in the UK. Most houses will be worth considerably more than that. They then take a large portion of anything over that level, 40% or so. So even when you're dead, they're stealing from your family. Just throwing it out there. Apparently there are loopholes. I don't know any. But yeah, this is what she's saying. If you give it to charity, you don't get taxed in the way that you would do if you were leaving it to a member of your family. So Mitchell, at this point, here's the old, oh, wait a minute. She wants to leave it to charity. So she says, you know what? I have got a great suggestion. I think you're right. We should definitely avoid that old inheritance tax. The charity idea sounds like a fabulous idea. Why don't I form a charity? What's that, Mitchell? Yeah, I just feel that I've heard what you were saying, and I think that I've got a solution. And the solution is to avoid inheritance tax and to ensure that charitable donations occur. I'll become a charity. So I will give you my home, but you're really a charity, so you'll basically get the money. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's it. That's totally it. So anyway, this is what she said. And then alternatively, she says that Deborah could transfer the house to her, and then she would pay into charity each month. That's literally what happened. So hang on a minute, Mitchell. So you could start your own charity and get the house. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Avoid inheritance tax. I don't know whether I'm that comfortable with that. I've got another idea. It's a great idea. You just give me the house. Just give me the house. Just sign it over to me. I'm not your relation. You've known me a month. It seems like a perfectly rational idea. And then what I'll do is I'll just give money every month to charity. How much? I haven't decided that. As a charity, we like to keep things very, very confidential. Genuinely, that was what Mitchell was saying. Not the bit that I've just reenacted there. That's just my idea of what happened. But it's obvious. Mitchell has a plan, doesn't she? Which immediately draws me into a very suspicious position where I think that the only reason that Mitchell has even connected with Deborah is because she has this master plan in mind. She wants to get her hands on Deborah's assets one way or another. Truth is, of course, the story I'm telling you today is because even though what I've just described is ludicrous and certainly involves a woman who wants to exploit a more vulnerable woman, but I don't think anybody, even if they'd heard that story being told, could have ever imagined the lengths that Mitchell was going to go to get her hands on that cash. So then we get to November 2020. And Mitchell starts to discuss this disastrous build and all these horrible financial woes with Deborah. That's understandable. Mitchell is in an awful situation. There's a whole load of blunders that have occurred in that build and they're living in squalor. So Deborah initially suggests using different builders, but then she offers to pay for the repairs. And she actually asks if she can meet Hillary, and that's Mitchell's mum, because of course at this point, if she's going to give them a large amount of money, she's essentially going to be investing in that property. So of course the meeting happens. The two meet around December 2020, and following this meeting, Deborah just agrees to give them £200,000 as a gift to spend on the house. Now, that in itself is a terrifying thing to imagine, isn't it? We have this vulnerable elderly woman. She wasn't in the best of health at all. History of problematic mental health and illness. And now she's literally agreeing to give a large amount of money to virtual strangers. And she has this caveat. She says, if I give you this £200,000, the actual home has to be used for Christian worship. Mitchell and her mother readily agree, snap her hand off, because of course this could be the resolution that they desire. And I don't for 1 minute imagine that they were going to let the house be used for Christian worship. I don't think anybody would have been able to fit in, and I mean that genuinely. It was in such a state of disrepair and just stuffed in every corner with things that were not necessary in that home, but probably were to do with, as I said, a hoarding scenario. So we know at this point, Mitchell's gone out of her way to create an alliance with a woman. Now she's taken advantage of that vulnerable woman, and she must have thought that every single birthday and Christmas had come at once and that all her problems were solved. But that relief does not last very long. So in early 2021, we see that Deborah's mental health begins to decline and she suffers a relapse. She's referred to the local community mental health team. And part of this is triggered by the fact she keeps sending bizarre letters to Prince Charles and Boris Johnson, and clearly it's indicating that there is something psychological going on and that psychiatrically she's not in a good place. So May 2021, they actually start to give her an antipsychotic medication where they inject her. A lot of people who watch my channel, you've suffered from your own mental health issues. I have worked with many people who don't feel comfortable taking tablets, are very suspicious of taking tablets. And one of the ways that they will often treat these kind of individual patients is to inject them. And those injections can last a week to 2 weeks. So it resolves the issue that they have with taking antipsychotic medication. So this is going on. Clearly they're trying to get a hold of her mental health decline. She is a pretty resistant person when it comes down to treatments. And even though she's getting this help now, it does demonstrate that we're dealing with somebody even more vulnerable. Her physical health, wow, she's getting really, really frail. So she needs someone to support her when she's walking. And to some degree, we're watching a woman who is coming to a position both physically, psychologically, that is clearly distressing for her. Now, Deborah is seen alive and well. She's going around her local area on the 8th and 9th of June 2021. She actually speaks to a neighbour on one occasion. But it also feels that something has shifted psychologically for her. And she has this change of mind and change of heart. And she withdraws the offer of financial aid to Mitchell and her mother. Now, this leads to a fallout between her and Mitchell. And one, we can say, that makes sense because, of course, if somebody has promised you a large amount of money, you think it's going to solve all your ills. When they suddenly remove that, you are going to be conflicted, even if you are somebody who wants to exploit somebody because you thought that you'd resolved your issues. But it also says something about Deborah. And I think it says one or two things. I can only give you both and express that it could be potentially, as far as I'm concerned, either. It could be that the decline has happened, and even though she's receiving the medication, she's feeling more suspicious and more paranoid, and that's making her check and sense check those decisions, and she's feeling scared of the things that she's agreed to, so she resists them and withdraws them. Or it could be that indeed she's getting to a better place mentally, and she's kind of looking and reflecting at the decisions that she's made about offering this huge sum of money, and she's starting to rethink it because she's in a better place mentally. Because it's a huge amount of money to give to somebody you've literally known only a few months. But this fallout occurs, and Deborah has an absolute right to withdraw that support. But I don't think for even a second, a millisecond even, that Deborah would have been able to envisage the actual repercussions that that decision would lead to. So Deborah says to Mitchell and her mother that what she feels they should do is to sell the house and enjoy the money. And Mitchell immediately, manipulatively, she responds, it's not in God's plan. So she's trying to coerce, isn't she, Deborah into that belief system of, hang on, Mitchell has got this more direct line to God, and is being advised that the house should stay with her and be repaired to some degree, which she's hoping will pressurise Deborah into fulfilling that agreement that she's made. Then on the 8th of June 2021, this is 1 a.m. in the morning, Deborah sends a message to Mitchell, and she's clearly feeling really harassed. She really is. So she says, "Until you sold house, I won't want you to come to me or my house. I am stressed to the core." I'm reading it verbatim as it was sent. So at this point, Mitchell then replies, "Peace to you. God has a plan and purpose for this dwelling. Apologies if answering your question about the quotes caused you any uncertainty about your decision." So again, level of manipulation there, isn't there? She's saying to Deborah, actually, God has a plan for this house. That's why I need your money, because this is what God wants. So the pressure is being applied as if God is applying it and not Mitchell. But the fact that Deborah is actually texting at 1 a.m. shows that she's probably not sleeping and she's really stressed out. We get to the 10th of June 2021, and at this point, Deborah's social worker speaks to her and to her lodger. So she has some professional engagement with the social worker and also her lodger who lives with her. They see her on the 10th of June 2021. And that is the last time anyone would hear from Deborah. So we get to 6:23 a.m. This is Friday the 11th of June 2021. Mitchell leaves her home in Bronsbury Park. And the thing about the capital, the thing about London and surrounding areas is you're always on CCTV, like literally always. Nowhere can you go anywhere without being followed. One day they'll be able to play your entire life on CCTV. From the moment you leave your home to the moment your coffin is carried into the church or wherever you happen to go for your final moments, it will be something you will probably be able to purchase. Oh, there's great Grandma Emma. There she is. There she is, little, getting bigger. Oh, there she is in the coffin. That's how it will be. But you certainly, in the capital and surrounding areas, can't go anywhere without being seen. So she leaves her home, caught on this CCTV, and she's carrying what can only be described as a very large blue suitcase. And it's not like it's a struggle. She's not like, oh, this is really hard. Wow, I should definitely have packed more lightly. No, she's like wheeling it around, could have thrown it across the head. You know, at the end of the day, it does not feel at this moment in time like there is very much in that suitcase. In fact, she lifts it with one hand, and she walked to Bronsbury Park Station, and then she catches a train to Stonebridge Park Station. She actually uses her mother's Freedom Pass, which means that she can get on any of the transport, and obviously is quite happy to pretend that she is her mother with respect. Again, a little bit of insight, because again, not all of us would feel comfortable. In fact, the vast majority of us would not feel that comfortable using somebody else's train pass. We get another sighting shortly before 8 a.m. She's caught on camera walking directly in the direction of Deborah's house. But by this point, she's actually disguised her appearance. So she's wearing a face mask and a hat, which I'm just going to throw out there, not very sophisticated. Because there's one thing thinking, do you know what? Probably need to disguise myself a little bit because, I don't know, I've got some kind of malevolent intent that's going to play out shortly. Bit of an issue when you're literally still wheeling the case. Throwing it out there. Bit of an issue. Same case, same height, same look. And at the end of the day, only short period before you were wheeling that exact case looking slightly different. It's not going to throw off the scent, is it? Like, literally, you could just have somebody with no training whatsoever just taking it up and going, yeah, that's the same person without doubt. Now, she gets to Deborah's house and she stays there for around 5 hours. And of course, I don't know exactly what happened during the time that she was in there, but the consequences, I promise you, will become horrifyingly clear. because Deborah's never seen alive again, for a start. And 5 hours is a long time. Now, it's believed that Deborah and Mitchell argued about money, and one imagines that Mitchell would have tried her best to get Deborah to give her the money as originally agreed. This is what people believe, and they think that at some point a disagreement turned violent, and then Mitchell attacked this very vulnerable woman. Although, again, even though that's what's reported, I just have this bit of my brain going, well, why did she take the case? Why did she take the case? I mean, that seems like there was more of a full intent to kill Deborah. So even though they may well have had an altercation and an argument, maybe it was just a scenario where Mitchell went along fully knowing that she was going to murder Deborah, prepared to do so, and didn't even need to get into a row with her because she was too busy thinking about what move she was going to make next. And one of the things that they also suggest is that Mitchell's case wasn't quite empty. It actually contained her murder kit. Think about this. We've got this elderly, very frail and vulnerable woman. She was 5'2", very slight, physically frail. She would not have stood a chance at all. She would not have stood a chance. And when they did the autopsy, they were able to establish that Deborah had been subjected to a really brutal assault. So she suffered a comminuted fracture to the skull. Now, basically what that kind of fracture is, it's where the skull, in this case, is broken into several pieces. So they don't even line up together. And they believe that that's because Mitchell bludgeoned her about the head with some kind of weapon. She also sustained multiple rib fractures, although it's worth also throwing in that they could have been caused by what Mitchell later did with Deborah's body. Horrifically, when Deborah was either dead or dying, it's at this point Mitchell then puts her anatomy skills to use. So she proceeds to decapitate the 67-year-old victim. So she detaches the head from her body between the vertebrae and the neck. I mean, what in that moment was Mitchell thinking? I appreciate she's probably going to want to get the body in the suitcase, and therefore she essentially decides that she needs to take certain elements of the body to get it in. But we're talking about a very small woman. It feels that she wanted to do it. I have to say, I genuinely feel that there is a part of this woman who wanted to take Deborah's head off. I think she was angry with her. I think that she wanted to be dominant and powerful and remove the head to dehumanize Deborah. So then, if this isn't horrific enough, Mitchell starts to rifle through her home because she's come for a very specific purpose. So she goes and collects important documents, she collects forms of ID, and it's pretty incredible what I'm going to talk about shortly, because when you think about the level of premeditation and planning, wow, Mitchell has gone to town. So she's got all of this ID, she's got all these documents, but she now has the big problem, doesn't she? She's got to dispose of Deborah's head and body. Now, again, they see Mitchell leaving Deborah's house. This is about 1:15 p.m. And it's immediately evident that things have changed. So first of all, this large blue case that she had been carrying without a problem, now it appears really bulky, really heavy. And Mitchell's actually caught on CCTV struggling with it. She's struggling to wheel it behind her. Now inside, we know that she's crammed Deborah's remains, but she's not just carrying that suitcase now. She's also carrying a second smaller red and blue bag. So she's taken something on top of Deborah and her body from her home, and she's actually got other items in that red and blue bag. And then she wanders around London with bags for around 2 hours, finally ends up getting a taxi to her home. Also, it appears that at some point, probably during the altercation when she was killing Deborah, that Mitchell's actually sustained an injury to her left hand. So she goes and attends St Thomas's Hospital later that evening, and she's actually treated for a fractured finger. She claims to have trapped it in the car door. Obviously, this is a lie. No doubt the injury had occurred while she was killing Deborah. Again, not very forensically clever. We know that she's now murdered Deborah. She's on CCTV everywhere, and now she's gone to hospital with an injury that could have happened when she was killing her. So there's a lot of pieces to this jigsaw that is very easy for investigators to place together. That evening, of course, we have a lodger, because Deborah's had a lodger. Comes home from work, can't find Deborah. And this is the kind of lodger we all want. They're really worried about her. It gets to 10:48 p.m. and he goes ahead and contacts the police and says, look, she's missing. He explains that he hasn't seen her since the evening of the 10th of June 2021. He's really concerned because he finds a mobile phone, he finds her glasses, can't find any trace of her whatsoever. And he says that it's like she just had vanished into thin air. And understandably, this is out of character for this woman. And we also know that she's had issues with mental decline and she's physically frail. So her lodger is understandably and rightfully concerned about her vulnerability. Now, when Mitchell is questioned about the possible disappearance or location of Deborah, she claims that Deborah had been feeling depressed, so had gone to visit family friends somewhere close to the ocean. I mean, I have had quite a lot of friends, vague acquaintances, quite a lot of colleagues in the past, people I chat to even today. And at no point has anyone been like, pretty depressed. Are you? Yeah, I'm feeling pretty depressed. Oh, what do you want to do about that? I think I'm going to go and visit some family friends. Sounds like a good idea. It's good. Reach out, speak to people. Yeah, I think I will. Where are you going to go? Somewhere close to the ocean. Have you not got a more specific place? I mean, if they're family friends, are you not going to tell me exactly where they are? Eastbourne seems nice. No, just somewhere close to the ocean. I'm a bit worried now. I'm worried you're not being specific. There's a large body of water involved and you're saying you're depressed. You know what I mean? Throwing it out there. It's not the kind of thing that people say. You're quite specific, aren't you? You'd say, I'm going A, B, or C. But again, Mitchell is trying to deflect and suggest that there is a reasoning as to where Deborah is. She's depressed, but she can't specifically give a location because that would cause a problem, wouldn't it? The police could check and then it would be found that she wasn't actually somewhere near the ocean. Anyway, Mitchell also doesn't have an idea of what to do at this point with her victim's body. They're decomposing in the back garden for 2 weeks, literally. So she's thought about things to this point, but she hasn't figured out what to do with Deborah's body. And it also shows a real disregard and disrespect. I mean, you can't get more disrespectful, can you? Or more disregarding than when you murder somebody, of course not. But the fact that she dumps them in the back garden, it just demonstrates that Deborah's an afterthought. She's not really the focus. There is a bigger focus for Mitchell. There's more important things to do. So she just leaves them rotting in the garden. So she comes up with a plan of how she's going to do this. And on the Saturday, 26th of June, 2021, she hires a car for the day. It's a grey Volvo. And this is where she puts to plan the disposing of Deborah's remains. So she puts the large suitcase into a trolley. She wheels it down the road, and God only knows how that would be smelling. Genuinely, anybody who's been anywhere near rotting flesh per se, but certainly if you work in the forces or you work in the police investigations, or if you even work as an individual who's like a pathologist, you will know that smell. And she's just wheeling it down a road, and then she puts it in the boot of the Volvo, and then she drives to Devon. That's over 4 hours drive. I dread to imagine how that car would have been smelling. Devon's actually 200 miles away from her home. And when I say during this, the wheels almost literally fall off her plan because she breaks down. Yeah, she literally gets the puncture en route to her planned destination, meaning that she has to call the AA. So she manages to get to a service station and she has to wait for a period of time for the AA to arrive. One of the things I will just note is that she may have had a first-class degree, but she evidently cannot change a tyre. Always surprises me how very bright people are not always so practical. Now, the AA man who arrived to deal with that situation, they later referred to Mitchell's demeanour as being very confused. Also, he said an odd, musty smell was inside the vehicle. Unsurprising, of course. Now, after the car was fixed, at this point, Mitchell now has less time to dispose of the body. And this is likely why she dumped it in an area that wasn't quite as remote as she probably would have wanted to. So the location that she dumps it in isn't completely outside of the realms of possibility of people walking there and so on and so forth. She leaves it in woodland in a seaside town of Salcombe on the South Devon coast. It's beautiful. And she actually left it at the bottom of some steps on a public footpath. I kid you not. Yes, that's what she did. She left Deborah's remains at the bottom of some steps on a public footpath. I mean, I don't know how less forensically sophisticated you could be, and I'm glad. I love the superiority and stupidity of certain individuals who think that somehow they're going to get away with murder. But I mean, goodness me, when it comes down to even the most basic, rudimentary idea of what you would do if you'd done something so heinous, to leave it in such a public area, firstly, is obviously going to draw attention to it because people are going to be passing it. Secondly, we know that there is a pungent smell that will attract flies and so on and so forth. But also, you've got no distance between you and the crime because you will have been seen driving and you will have been known to have hired a car, and all of these things are just like a breadcrumb trail to your arrest. So we get to the following day, literally just the following day. Sunday afternoon, 27th of June 2021. Charlotte Rowlings, she's just walking back to her holiday cottage because it's a very beautiful area. So, you know, just having a nice day, having a lovely time. Love this area. Beautiful. Salcombe's gorgeous. Trotting along, probably thinking about what they were going to have for an evening meal, just taking in the salt air, and then boom, massively grisly discovery on Bennett Road. At the bottom of these steps, she finds Deborah's badly decomposed, headless body. I mean, that in itself is just beyond horrific, isn't it? And again, what does that tell you about the respect that this woman had for this poor, frail lady? Just dumping her there. Now, Charlotte, who had clearly just gone out for a nice wander, probably thinking about what a wonderful time she was having, is now traumatized by this. She immediately phones emergency services and says, "I've just found a body." And she at this point felt that it must have been there a few days because it was covered in flies. Bear in mind, we know that that body has been rotting in the back garden at Mitchell's. So there is going to be a pungency. And of course, immediately flies will have been on the body. And because it's had time to decompose in the back garden, maggots and so on and so forth will have formed. And so for poor Charlotte, this is what she finds. But there's another thing that feels really odd because it seems like the corpse has actually been dressed in clothes that did not belong to Deborah. In fact, they were several sizes too big. Now, at this point, murder investigation, of course, is immediately launched. They seal off the area. One of the problems that they've got is they can't find Deborah's head at that point. Now, this changes a few days later. It's the 1st of July 2021, and the severed head was actually discovered beneath undergrowth during the police search. It was only about 10 metres actually away from where Deborah's body had been discovered. So fortunately, they are able to bring home her body, so to speak. 6th of July 2021, Mitchell gets arrested at home. This is at the home, as you know, that she shares with her mother. The officers, they arrived really early in the morning. They smash open the front door and genuinely, my goodness, what can I say? Because I promise you, I cannot get my head around how Mitchell ever thought there was even the vaguest potential of her not getting caught for this. The idea that she's made so many obvious errors, thank God, because We absolutely want her to be brought to justice. But the fact that she genuinely, when they arrive after smashing a door in, the look that she gives them is one that's bewildered. So she says, hello, how are you? It's in a real soft-spoken voice, tells officers that she and her mum had been asleep, so that's why she hadn't answered the door. And then she just plays dumb. Looks really shocked and surprised when she's being told that she's being arrested on suspicion of murder. I would have liked to have been there. I would genuinely want to be there and be like, you're being arrested on suspicion of murder. Why? Why me? Well, I think it's probably, just going to throw it out there, the fact that we have you on CCTV, literally going to the individual who was murdered's house with an empty suitcase, coming back with a full suitcase. Also, that weird disguise thing that you did that just didn't make any sense. Also, the Volvo, the AA person, Charlotte who discovered the body, and you being in all those places at that time, throwing it out there. Me? Really? Oh no, it's a mistake. It isn't though, is it? It's not a mistake. And I can tell you now, my 8-year-old son has decided to represent the prosecution in court because we just think it'll be a laugh watching how simple it is to get a conviction. That's my fantasy in my head. It didn't happen like that.
Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. There's no answer. Sorry, what's your name?
Sorry, we're asleep.
Are you Gemma?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, Gemma. Just could you hold a second?
Sure, sorry.
Come on a second.
Sorry, can I
Gemma, do you want to come out?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to see them.
Hand, just so your hands. All right, Gemma, at this moment, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything, but you may have a defence. Do not mention one question, something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence, okay? Once we're in the cuffs,
Am I allowed to...
I'll go explain everything to you, okay?
Should I get some
Yeah,
shoes
sorry.
then?
What?
If you want to one sec.
Inside?
Who's inside at the moment?
Mother.
Your mother?
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to... Oh, because someone left that up.
Yeah. Let's step back inside.
Is anyone else inside? Just your mum?
Yeah.
There is someone else inside,
No,
or just your
that's
mum?
just my mum, yeah.
All right, do you want to... Should I bring her out, or...
Bring her in.
Bring her in?
For a minute,
Right,
yeah.
we're just going to come in for a...
But she basically does act really surprised, although she doesn't act angry. Now that always gets me. If you are innocent and somebody breaks into your home, the police knock your door in, and let me tell you, front doors, they're not cheap these days. They're all difficult to install because of all the different locks that you need for flipping insurers. If the police came, knocked my door down off its hinges, woke me up, I went downstairs and they were like, listen, Emma, game's up. You're being arrested for murder. First of all, I'd be like, listen, get out here and fix that door. I don't have many expensive possessions, but I don't want people just wandering in. Number 2, what are you on about? I haven't killed anyone. How dare you? Number 3, Pete, call a lawyer. Because genuinely, I'd be like, something horrible has gone wrong. I would be like, oh, I'll be really compliant. I'm really surprised. I can't quite believe you smashed my door down in my front house. I was just asleep. That's not how I would act. Just throwing it out there. Most people, yes, even in shock, will be very, very resistant. But she isn't. Now, later during the police interview, this, I don't know what you mean. It couldn't possibly be me. I was asleep. Suddenly isn't quite the same. Just completely uncooperative. And uses the classic of every innocent person, because it's important, you know, it's important to remember that innocent people who have nothing to hide, when they're interviewed, answer no comment to every question. I genuinely still stand by my belief system. I think that there should be like a fast track to prison. And if you try to say no comment to every question, you just essentially don't get a court case. You just get the police together. They just throw their ideas of how long they should serve in prison into a hat, probably a police hat, although a hat of any choice, whichever hat you fancy, a jar, whatever you want, a vessel of some type. And then you just pick it out. Oh, John, you've done it again, John. John, 150 years, John, brilliant. Let's get her transported there. But yeah, this is what she does, no comment to every single question.
And they've said that the person driving the Volvo waited in the car all that time with the windows down and the front door open, the passenger door open, when it was literally chucking it down with rain, and it was windy. Why is that, Gemma?
No comment.
The car stank, didn't it, Gemma?
No comment.
Stunk of a dead person.
No comment.
Stunk of Deborah's decomposing body. Is that right, Gemma?
No comment.
But the investigators are like, you don't need to answer any at all, because if there was a dot-to-dot drawing of being able to capture a criminal, we have every single number and a very nice pen to complete it. So they can just immediately find all this wealth of evidence against her. There is a substantial amount of evidence. There is just this jigsaw puzzle with every single piece in place, essentially, that the police can put together very, very quickly. Now, it does take 50 police officers several weeks to actually search Mitchell's property because, wow, like I said at the very beginning, it's full of hoarded rubbish. It's got lots of rotting food in there. Now, during this search, the police officers do find a red and blue bag, and investigators suspect it was the same bag that Mitchell had taken from Deborah's house. Not great investigation work there. They've literally got CCTV of that bag. This bag looks familiar. It's on the CCTV. Do you think that this bag is the same bag that's on the CCTV? I think it's on the CCTV and it's in the house that we're searching with the woman who's carried out the murder. I think it's a fair shot at saying that's the bag. Maybe she's got the similar bag. Maybe she's got her own bag that's just the same. I don't want to carry on this conversation. It's the bag. But anyway, they get this bag and it's unbelievable what they find. It is astonishing. I mean that. Astonishing. The grandiose behaviour that we're talking about when Mitchell is concerned is quite staggering. So this is a bag full of Deborah's documents, and it includes her passport, her driving licence, naturalisation papers, bank and credit cards, loyalty cards. Also, they find the will. Yeah. This will, unsurprisingly and very conveniently, allegedly belonged to Deborah. So allegedly she's written this will, and it leaves 95% of her £7,000 plus estate to Mitchell, and the remaining 5% to her mother. Yeah. So it's not even like she was going to be gracious and say, well, I've got 95% for me, 5% for that charity that, you know, Deborah wanted to potentially leave it to. No, just all to her and her mum. Now, clearly it's fake and it's been designed to, again, exploit Deborah even after death. They actually found that it contained signatures of Deborah and 2 witnesses, and all of them were forgeries. Now, this is going to even further blow your mind. In fact, one of the signatures, and this is mind-blowing, was apparently signed by a former neighbour of Mitchell's, Virgil Garagita. The only thing is that it turns out he died some months earlier. So a little bit convenient there that, you know, this Virgil is no longer able to say whether he signed it or otherwise, but it gets even worse. So police managed to establish that following Virgil's death, Mitchell actually managed to get into his property. She'd taken papers, which included his passport, his phone, and the expert who looked at that will concluded that the signature on the will had been copied from the signature on the passport. Also, Mitchell had actually had the audacity to later ring a phone company pretending to be Virgil and got his phone reactivated. And that's how she arranged the car hire. She used that phone to arrange the hire, and then she took Virgil's phone on the journey to Devon, where she disposed of Deborah's body. Now that's evidence of an organised offender, isn't it? I mean, there's so much poor forensic sophistication, I appreciate that. But when it comes down to thinking about, well, I don't want them to know my journey, if I use this phone, arguably they won't realise it's me. Problem being, it is you, you're on the CCTV, and now we know that you took a dead man's phone and reactivated and stole his signature. I mean, if you want to add fuel to the fire, it seems that she went out and bought several cans of lighter fluid, probably some alcohol to chuck on there as well. But it does show organisation, you know, even though, like I said, it's very easy to catch her out. If you think about the fact that she had the suitcase, she had a kill kit, she thought that she created a scenario where she'd created a ruse regarding the police following her phone-wise. So Virgil seems to be the one driving, not her. And all these things have had planning. They've taken time. She's been thinking about this murder for a period of time. Now, that suitcase that Mitchell had used to transport Deborah's body, that was even found on the roof of her neighbour's shed. Can you imagine being that neighbour? Can you imagine being that neighbour? Seriously, it's moments like that where my head just goes somewhere and you're like thinking to yourself, Maureen, yeah, have you noticed the shed? My garden shed. I don't go very often. John, it's your particular area. I know, but Maureen, I feel that there is something on top of our shed. What is it? I think it's a suitcase. Is it a good suitcase? I don't know. Weather's been bad. I'll go out and investigate. I've been able to smell something that I don't really like right now. But anyway, again, the fact that she's disposing these things in these areas and the clear concept in her mind that somehow she's going to be better at carrying out a murder than the police are at realising that she's responsible for it. It is bodacious. She's banged to rights. She's made so many mistakes. It's always going to be the case that she was banged to rights. And yet, for whatever reason, she has genuinely planned to get away with this. Without a doubt, I genuinely feel that Mitchell at no point thought that she'd end up getting caught. When they look at the CCTV, which captured everything, by the way, it even captured Mitchell waiting for the AA at the service station. Now, on that day, it was windy, it was raining really heavily, and yet she'd left the car door wide open and the windows down. Now, undoubtedly, that's because of the overpowering smell of decomposing body that was in the boot. And aside from the CCTV, we have witnesses who actually see Mitchell driving that hire car on Bennett Road, which was only 50 metres away from where Deborah's body was found the following afternoon. Also, Mitchell had been captured on CCTV driving towards the woodland area where the body was later found. So they have an absolute array of evidence that's highly incriminating, and it's evidential that there's absolutely no way, as far as I am concerned, that she has a leg to stand on when it comes down to defence. So then we get to Mitchell's trial. This begins at the Old Bailey in October 2022, so very, very recent. And guess what? She doesn't give any evidence. Again, it's what an innocent person always does, isn't it? You know, when it comes down to the prosecution, you're like, I am innocent. I have nothing to hide. Great, we've got quite a lot of questions for you. I am not going to speak. But if you're innocent, don't you want to defend yourself? That would make sense, but I'm not going to speak. Are you actually not guilty then? I can't speak. I can't say anything. So anyway, she doesn't give any evidence at all, but she does plead not guilty to murder. I mean, that's just beyond me. Not guilty. I am not surprised that she doesn't get to speak in her defence, because I would imagine that the defence are like, are you really sure that you want to go not guilty? I'm totally sure I want to go not guilty. Why? Because I'm not guilty. You are guilty though. We're your defence and we know you're guilty, and the reason that we know you're guilty is we've literally got the whole jigsaw puzzle. There's not a piece missing, incriminating evidence, the will, the fact they've got you on the case and CCTV footage, the fact that they've got the body where you were driving, the fact that you were on the motorway and got stuck at services because, you know, the AA had to come and help you. I know all that, but I still think I've got a good chance. I got a first-class degree, don't you know? And I was a very good osteopath. I don't think any of that counts. It's not guilty for me. Anyway, she basically doesn't give any testimony at all. And what I would say is that she left it to the prosecution to prove her guilt. And oh, how they were glad to oblige. It was not a difficult or challenging case for them. In fact, I doubt they did any revision. I would imagine they were just like, who wants to take this case? Well, I'll do it. Are you sure? Aren't you actually the person who just does the admin? Yeah, but I'll do it. Barristers are very busy these days. You know what? You're right. You take it. Honestly, I genuinely believe that that's possible. It's 27th of October 2022, and obviously barristers were involved and the prosecution took it very, very seriously. I jest, but I'm just saying it kind of gets me when somebody goes not guilty and the weight of evidence is just going to be something that destroys them. Certainly, again, what does that say about this person's character, this person's superiority, a belief that somehow by staying quiet and saying nothing that she's going to get away with it, or indeed an unwillingness to accept responsibility for what she's done. So on the 27th of October 2022, the jury take several hours to deliberate, which I don't know, feels like quite a long time really. Not sure they needed that long, but whatever. And then they come back and they deliver their verdict of guilty. And she stood there impassively when that was given to her. Then she's sent down. So in the UK, you literally get sent down. So the dock is here and you get sent down, and then you usually go to the holding cells below. That's where the term sent down comes from. But as she's doing that, her mother is blowing kisses to her. So her mother's fully supportive and doesn't believe that her daughter has done this. Then we get to the 28th of October 2022, and 38-year-old Mitchell becomes the first UK female murderer to be sentenced live on air. The hearing was broadcast live from the Old Bailey, and Judge Richard Marks, KC, he identified all the really, really serious aggravating factors. So first of all, the murder's been carried out for financial gain. It's not a crime of passion, not that that's ever excusable. This is something that has been about exploitation from the get-go. Now, Deborah also was incredibly vulnerable, and Mitchell went out of her way to exploit and use and take advantage of their friendship. Also, another aggravating factor, her body had been mutilated. And on top of that, Mitchell showed absolutely no remorse, never accepted any responsibility, and seems to be in complete denial of her actions. I personally think that she's just good at wearing a mask and she knows exactly what she's done. She just doesn't want people who trust and love her to know what a heinous human being that she is. So she ended up getting sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years.
I am driven to the conclusion that you are extremely devious. I said at the outset of these remarks that I would return to the issue of mitigating and aggravating features. The sole mitigation is that you are effectively a woman of previous good character, although given the gravity of your crime, in my judgment, that entitles you to only a very modest discount. As to aggravating features, there are the following. Firstly, the amount of planning and premeditation that went into this offence, although it is right to acknowledge that this is bound to be an invariable feature of a killing done for gain, and I must avoid double counting in that regard. Secondly, there is the issue of Deborah's mental and physical vulnerability, to which I have already referred, and of which you were very well aware. Thirdly, there is the chilling aspect of what you did to and with her body after you had killed her. You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking, even more so given your apparent religious devotion, as well as the fact that Deborah Chong was a good friend to you and had shown you great kindness. The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment, and the minimum term of imprisonment that you will in any event be required to serve will be 34 years. There will be deducted from that term the 475 days that you have spent in custody on remand, and the statutory surcharge will apply.
Now, after hearing that her daughter had been sent down for 34 years, Mitchell's mother stated this: "As far as I'm concerned, she did not do it. She's innocent. There's absolutely no question about it. And I know she would not do such a thing. I'm absolutely baffled." Are you? Are you absolutely baffled? Are you? I'm wondering, because I feel like you love your child and you unconditionally accept that child even when they are a monster at times. But with respect, how can you be baffled when it's all on CCTV? I mean, it's not coincidence. Why was she in Devon? You know, throwing it out there. Just a bit of a coincidence. Just going on a day trip. There's no way, if you listen to the evidence, that you cannot come to the conclusion that Mitchell is 100% guilty. Now, she actually, as a mother, claimed that her daughter's suitcase on CCTV had been filled with crockery, cutlery, and tea towels. I mean, if I'm not wandering the streets with a large suitcase, carrying my cutlery, crockery, actually various other items of pottery, sometimes the odd clock, I don't know what I'm doing. It's something on every Wednesday, Saturday, sometimes a Thursday that I'm consistently able to do because I like wheeling things around. It's what I do. If I'm not out there doing it, then what am I doing? And I'm sure that a lot of you agree. If we're not pulling those suitcases full of heavy items of crockery and tea towels, then we are doing something wrong. Now, aside from the sarcasm, it is quite difficult to analyse Mitchell's psychology because we haven't got a lot of information available. But I guess that we can draw and conclude that she has displayed stereotypical signs of antisocial personality disorder, so highly narcissistic. All that mattered to her was getting money from a victim. She exploited a friend's obvious vulnerability. When she was denied the money, she killed Deborah and then just tried to take the money anyway. It's incredibly devious. It's incredibly manipulative. And she also showed that she was capable of unimaginable violence. She killed Deborah in an absolutely brutal way. She bludgeoned her about the head and then she decapitated her. And what's even more bizarre is, as I said earlier, that decapitation wasn't even an attempt to disguise Deborah's identity because the head was ultimately left with the body. So why did she do it? Maybe because she wanted to. And like I said, why did she keep the body for 2 weeks before disposing of it? At the same time, whilst I've talked about all those forensic, non-sophisticated actions that we've talked about, she was definitely a highly intelligent individual. Her mother actually described her as a loving daughter, and she's definitely still in denial of the fact that she has a child who's a murderer. And I guess that part of that is because she was a complete chameleon. And because she was a complete chameleon, it's doubtful that people suspected that she was capable of doing such a crime. She does show signs of being an organised offender. She befriended the victim. She took advantage of her during a psychotic relapse. She clearly planned the murder. She went with a suitcase, probably with a kill kit, to the victim's house. She took documents from the house. She needed to forge a will, so she knew exactly how to do that. Previously had broken into Virgil's home, the deceased neighbour, again with a view to forging his signature on the fake will, and using his phone during the disposal of the body. But she also displayed very disorganised traits, didn't she? Because, I don't know, she was just captured everywhere on CCTV before and after the killing. She dumped her body and head where they would be found, and all of the evidence led the police straight to Mitchell. Now, Detective Chief Inspector Jim Eastwood, he actually led the police investigation. He stated that Mitchell had never accepted responsibility for the murder. And that is a problem. Because if you don't expect responsibility, then how can you ever show remorse? And if you don't show remorse, then how can you ever be rehabilitated? Because if you don't believe you've done anything wrong, then you could do that again and again and again. So the truth is we may never know, because she won't take responsibility for this crime, why she decapitated Deborah, why she kept her body for a fortnight, or indeed why she disposed of her remains in Salcombe. Could just be the workings of a highly disturbed psychopathic mind. When it comes down to parole, well, she will not be eligible for it, probably ever. I'm throwing it out there. She'll probably never walk the streets again. But if she ever gets that opportunity, it won't be until the 10th of July, 2055. And at that point, she'll be 70 years of age. So, like I said, it's unlikely that she's ever going to get the opportunity to be a danger to our society again. There is another bit of my brain that's like, unfortunately, it also means that she'll probably have better living conditions. She didn't even have a roof. They didn't have working bathrooms, apparently, at the house. So, to some degree, the state will take care of her in a way that she couldn't even take care of herself. And that grates on me a little bit. It's outstandingly astonishing, mind-blowingly cruel that Deborah, a woman who was known for her generosity, her compassion, her faith, was seen as an individual with vulnerabilities that could be exploited, that could be taken and squeezed from her along with her life. The fact that Mitchell was so comfortable in planning this and carrying it out, that says, as far as I am concerned, that she is a stone cold killer. And while she may be seen by people who knew her to be loving, I think what we know of these kind of characters and predators is that they have the capacity to act in certain ways to get them what they need. But if you cross them, they will take your life without a breath of conscience, without a care or consideration for the meaning that you have in this world. And Mitchell, beyond a shadow of a doubt for me, fits that personality paradigm perfectly. Let me know what you think of this case. Have you heard of it? Are you as stunned by it as I am? And what are your feelings about the con artistry involved initially in getting Deborah to feel that she had to give so much money away to Mitchell, and then the way that Mitchell responded when she didn't get what she wanted? Leave me a like, leave me a comment, subscribe if you want to. Most importantly, as I say every time, thanks so much for watching me. Thanks for getting involved in my community. I appreciate you massively. And yeah, I am wearing my Do Not Comply army print top. Is it an army print? It's like a camouflage. I don't know. Anyway, they are available now. Take care, my lovelies. Be safe.